Most people think the Garden of Eden is a story about the beginning, the first humans, the first mistake, the fall. But what if none of that is what it was actually about? What if the Garden of Eden isn't a place, but a state of consciousness? And what if the fall was not something that happened back then? Because if that's true, then this story isn't history. It's a map. Everything we've been building up to leads here. Because once you understand how attention works, how identity forms, and how awareness gets pulled outward, you're finally able to see this story clearly. Not as something outside of you, but as something within you. The Garden of Eden is described as a place of wholeness, no fear, no shame. That's not just a location. That's a state of being, a state where awareness is present, but not divided. Where you exist without overthinking yourself, without questioning your worth, without comparing. This is the garden. And every human being has experienced this at least once. Before overthinking, before identity took over, before you became self-conscious. Now here's where it gets deeper. In the center of the garden, there are two trees, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And this is where most people misunderstand everything. Because knowledge here is not intelligence. It's division. The moment you label something good or bad, you split reality. You create duality. And the moment you enter duality, you leave presence. You leave the garden. Because now, instead of experiencing life, you're judging it, analyzing it, comparing it. And that creates distance between you and reality. Now let's talk about the serpent. Most people were taught that the serpent was evil. But look deeper. The serpent doesn't force anything. It suggests. It introduces a thought. You will be like God. And that's interesting. Because we just talked about the idea that awareness itself is already connected to something higher. So what is the serpent actually doing? It's introducing self-consciousness. The voice in your mind, the inner dialogue that says, is this right? Is this wrong? How do I look? What do they think? The serpent represents thought pulling you out of presence. And once you identify with that voice, you leave the garden. So what is the fall? It's not punishment. It's identification. The moment awareness forgets itself and becomes the mind, the moment you stop observing your thoughts and start believing them, that's the fall. And what happens next in the story? Shame, fear, hiding, self-consciousness. That should sound familiar because that's the human experience. Their eyes were opened, but not in the way people think. They didn't gain clarity. They gained self-awareness in the form of judgment. They became aware of themselves. And that separation created insecurity, created fear, created identity. So the awakening in that moment was actually disconnection. And this is why everything we've talked about matters. Because once you're in that state, you're easier to control. You seek validation. You compare yourself. You try to prove your worth. You become predictable. And predictable systems are easy to manage. So the fall is not just spiritual. It's psychological. It's social. It's structural. But here's the part that no one talks about. If the garden is a state of consciousness, then it was never lost. It was just forgotten. And that changes everything. Because now the question isn't, how do I get back? It's, how do I remember? Because the story was never about the past. It's about now. Every time you over-identify with your thoughts, you leave the garden. Every time you return to awareness, you step back into it. And that means the garden is always available. Not somewhere else, not later, now. So again, if this story was also misunderstood, what else has been? Because these weren't just stories, they were instructions. And we are now reading them correctly. I'll see you in the next one.